Welcome, and thank you for joining the channel. Please help this channel by liking and subscribing. We really appreciate it. There are no ads on this video. If you have any stories you would like me to share on this channel, comment below and your story will be featured in the video. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy these 4 creepypastas of imaginary friends. Trigger warning. Story 1 does mention child abuse. If you or someone you know is a victim or is sensitive to the topic, please skip to story 2. Timestamps will be in the description. There's a 10-year age gap between me and my sister, Elise. My mom left my dad when I was just a baby, and I grew up with my mom and my aunt. We didn't have much, but the house was filled with laughter and love, and I had a pretty good childhood. Well, that changed when I was 9, and my mom found Stefan. He wasn't pretty, he wasn't kind, and he wasn't smart. A college dropout who still quoted philosophers. Me and my mom didn't know 20 years after he dropped out. He was a drunk too, but he had a job as a teacher. Only God knows how he kept that job for as long as he did. And money started being less tight when he moved in with us and pushed my aunt out. My aunt saw right through him, but she wasn't my mom, nor was she my mom's mom, so she couldn't do much. That mean bastard didn't bring anything good with him, except Elise. She's nothing like him. Well, my early childhood was alright. Elise's wasn't. Stefan had a son, a small boy named Ethan, 3 years younger than me. He looked like he was at least years younger than me. And it only got worse as we both grew up. I don't blame Ethan, but he took after his father. Pinched Elise when she was a baby, bullied her when she got older, and I wasn't around as much. Stefan said it was just boys being boys, and my mom was blindly in love with Stefan. So, while she acted like she was Stefan and Ethan's maid, she forgot about Elise and me. I did alright. Spent a lot of time with my aunt, but Elise was a scrawny little kid, lonely and alone most of the time. When she was 3 or 4, we had been out in the local woods to do some hiking. Stefan loved hiking, so of course we had to hike as a family. It was in a clearing in those woods that Elise found Robert, or at least that's what she said. She said Robert was an adult, which didn't mean much, since she also thought I was an adult all the time. He was tall, white, and had long dark hair. Always wore a necklace with a big tooth, and most importantly, he always wanted to play when Elise asked. He lived with us, she said. Slept in her bed most of the time. I think he gave her a much needed break from Ethan's bullying and mom's neglect. My aunt thought it was a cute thing. Kids have imaginary friends all the time. My mom and I thought it was creepy. Ethan was scared shitless, especially when Elise told him that Robert sleeps in your room now, but he doesn't like you. Robert didn't stay with Ethan for long. Ethan wasn't Robert's friend. He was Elise's. They played a lot. I can't remember the games, but while a lot of other kids spend most of their times with their actual friends, Elise spent most of her time with Robert. It went on until she was 6 or 7. While I got less scared, my mom's fear of Robert just grew. She even drove out to the woods to make Elise leave Robert where she found him. We recently had a family lunch. My aunt, my sister, my mom, and me. My mom broke up with Stefan years back, and Elise is 17 now. We talked about Robert, and Elise laughed and said that she didn't leave him back in the woods when Mom told her to. My mom asked if he was actually a ghost, and my aunt and sister laughed. "No, Mom, chill out," Elise said. "There's no ghost. It was just an imaginary friend." Elise and my aunt laughed some more. My mom said, "But it's just weird. You could describe him so well." My sister and aunt continued to poke fun at my mom. She's always been quite the believer in the supernatural. I would have laughed too, but I didn't. I used to be like them, until I found some old records. I'm a history major at a local community college, so I know my way around the town's archives. I was looking for something in the old newspapers about some farmers' strike for an assignment when I found it. It was an article about a young man that had been missing, but turned up dead in the woods. Yeah, those exact same woods Stefan took us hiking in. His name was Robert. He was 28. And in the black and white photo from 1965, you could see that Robert was white, had long dark hair, and a friendly smile. He also wore a necklace, which looked like a leather string with a shark tooth as a pendant. Well, it was creepy as fuck, so I continued to look into it. His killer was never found, but the worst part is that Robert wasn't as friendly as he seemed. So in that photo, he had tried to rape a 6-year-old girl, and when that didn't work out, he tried to strangle her. The girl survived, and Robert spent some time in jail for it. He went missing a few days after his release. I'm pretty freaked out about this because I'm 99% sure that this is the same Robert that my sister had as an imaginary friend. I haven't told my family about this, and honestly, I don't think I ever will. There's no need to ruin the few good childhood memories Elise has. Like most kids, when I was younger, I had an imaginary friend. His name was Aiden, and he was a little boy around the same age as me. Even I first started seeing him when I was like 4 or 5. I imagine he was around 7 or 8. He was almost like my opposite. He had dark hair while I was blonde. He was short while I grew taller. And he liked darker colors as opposite to my bright style. I pictured him until I was 9 or 10 when my parents were a step that I still had an imaginary friend. I hadn't thought about him all through middle or high school since I started gaining real friends and finally came out of my shell my imagination created. That is, until the other day. My mother died last week, leaving the house empty since my father died before I went off to college. I'm 28 now. Both of my parents died because of sudden and inexplicable strokes, and the doctors have tried to convince me it isn't genetic. This meant me, being an only child, had to go and clear out the house and sell it since no one would be living in it anymore. I've been living out of state for a while, but I got the call about my mother as we were preparing for me to visit her for Easter. Walking back into the house for the first time since last Christmas was awful. There were Easter decorations half put up and spread out around the house. Shoes in a messy pile by the door, and pillows and blankets tossed carelessly on the back of furniture to be used later. But the house was quiet. None of my dad laughing while cooking in the kitchen. None of my mom making fun of me as I got ready to leave for school in the morning. None of me having friends over and having to frantically clean the house to my mom's liking. I felt my face start to heat up as my eyes watered, but I did my best to keep my composure. I didn't want to sell the house, but I had a life set up 3 states away and didn't need to come back to my hometown. So I did my best to set things straight in the house. If finding things I hadn't seen since I was a kid boxed up in the attic. I was preparing to move them to either my house, the auction house, or some pawn shop or something to sell them away. While I'm sifting through all the things I didn't know my parents had kept, like drawings from when I was really little, and notes I had written them when they got home past my bedtime, I noticed a small leather-bound journal that flooded me with memories of 1st and 2nd grade. I recognized it was a gift from my great aunt on my dad's side, and I got it around the time I started seeing and playing with Aiden. The notebook made me smile sadly, and then looking through it, I realized I had never really written in it, so I put it in a box to go up in my attic, since I couldn't talk to myself into getting rid of it. I should have burned the damn thing, then and there. As I went on sorting through things in the attic, I kept thinking about Aiden and all the crazy things I did as a kid when I thought he was real. My parents tried to take me seriously, but they always got tired when I tried to blame my imaginary friend for things that I know he did. When I thought about it, I remember very vividly a time I tried to tell my parents Aiden was the one who broke the plate while I was emptying the dishwasher. I know that I was the one who was sorting the silverware, and he offered to help me by starting in the racks. I, as a normal 8-year-old, let him help so I could get back to my comics upstairs. He was trying to reach up to the cabinet where the plates went, but it was too tall for him and me, so he accidentally dropped the plate while trying to get the door open. The ceramic shattered on the tile as my parents came running in. I turned to Aiden to see if he would apologize for it, since I knew they'd forgive an accident, but he had vanished. I then sighed, letting my parents give me the whole "you need to own up to your actions" speech for the 20th time. But the thing is, I don't remember ever grabbing the plate to put it in there. I was doing something else. As that hit me, I heard a quiet voice come from behind me. "Zach?" I spun around as quickly as I could, but didn't see anyone. It had sounded almost like Aiden's voice, which prompted me to finish up the box I was in and resolve to come back to the attic and do the last few boxes later. I headed down the ladder and into the hallway by my old bedroom when I heard it again, but slightly louder. "Zach." It was my name, and it definitely sounded like Aiden. I knew I had been hearing things. I was an adult. Adults don't have imaginary friends. "I knew you'd come back." I blinked, and I saw a little boy standing in front of me. He looked no older than 7 or 8, with very pale skin and jet black hair, wearing a dark red shirt and some shorts. I closed my eyes and shook my head, determined that I was just seeing things as a result of grief or being back in my old house. But of course, when I opened my eyes, Aiden was still standing in front of me. "Aiden?" I said softly, causing the boy to nod excitedly. "You finally come back to play with me again." He kept smiling, but instead of making me feel warm and welcome, it just sent a shiver up my spine. "Your evil mommy tried to keep me from you, but I finally got you back." "What do you mean?" I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I pinched myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't, no matter how much I wished I was. "Your daddy was the first to go. He figured out about me, so your mommy had to deal with me instead." He grinned, which only sent me more on edge. "Aiden, what are you talking about?" I don't know why I kept talking to him, but I was too frozen to move as he slowly walked towards me. "Oh, silly, you don't remember? Don't worry about it. You can just stay here with me and play." I never noticed as a kid. But in seeing him this close again, I noticed what looked like dark bruising all the way around his neck. What happened to you? I finally managed to take a step back, carefully, not to back up too far and stumble down the steps. What do you mean? I've always been like this. It's me. All it took was the light shining directly down on Aiden and going mostly through him for me to turn and bolt down the stairs and head to the front door. Zach, no. As I reach for the door, Aiden reappears in front of me, blood dripping from the side of his now twisted grin. You aren't leaving me again. The last thing I remember was Aiden reaching a hand into my chest and my vision going blurry and then black. I woke up in the hospital with nurses looking down at me hopefully. Mr. Heatherton, glad to see you're still with us. They explained that I suffered a stroke just like both of my parents. They said they could find no cause, and as long as testing went well, I should be able to go home and live a regular and long life afterwards. But I know what happened. Now I'm gonna destroy that son of a bitch if I have to come back from the grave like him to do it. I have known my friend Gary since before I can remember. He's always been there with me, and I've always been able to talk to him, especially when I had no one else. When I tell people about him, they think I'm crazy, so I've learned to keep quiet about him so that I don't get sent to a loony bin or something. But I know the truth. I know he's real, and I'm not crazy, and he's my friend. I'm not sure how old I was when I first met Gary, but it was a very young age, before I had even started school. I was probably about 4 or 5. I remember it well. I had been sent up to my bedroom as a punishment for something I had done. I can't remember what, probably being rude to my mom or something. In any case, I had decided that instead of going to my room, I would go to my parents' room and get a bit of revenge on my mother for shouting at me and sending me upstairs. I would carry out my revenge, I had decided, by getting her favorite lipstick and drawing rude pictures all over her dresser mirror. That was when I saw Gary. I had the lipstick in my hand and was about to commence with my petty vandalism when I saw his reflection. He was standing there in the corner of the room, watching me. When I turned to look, there was nobody there, so I turned back to the mirror to make sure I wasn't imagining things. But lo and behold, there he was, the young boy, like myself, looking into my eyes via the mirror. What are you doing? He asked me. I'm drawing on my mom's mirror. Why? Because she's stupid and she sent me to my room. He seemed impressed by my ideas and decided to help me. He did so by giving me some ideas as to what to write on the mirror. Obviously, I was unable to write at that age, so he had to tell me how to draw each letter. Several hours later, my mother came upstairs and went into her bedroom, and I heard her from my room. She shrieked a little at what she saw on her mirror. In bright red lipstick were the words, "Filthy cunt, bitch, whore." She stormed into my room and asked me if I had written these horrible things on her mirror. Naturally, I denied it at first, but after the threat of being grounded for a month, she quickly broke me. She then demanded to know where I had learned these words, since they were not words that any child of my age should know. So I told her. I learned them from my new friend. She then asked for the name of the friend and asked if he was a big boy or a grown-up, to which I said I don't know, and that he was my age. She asked me several other questions, such as I know where he lived, which I didn't, and how I met him, which I told her. It was in her room. At this point, she rolled her eyes, obviously grasping that I was going through the imaginary friend phase. Obviously slightly relieved that I hadn't been making friends with strange men, her tone of voice softened. But I could tell that she was still angry with me for what I'd done. She must have assumed I overheard someone using bad language or something. It clearly hadn't dawned on her that I shouldn't be able to spell them. But she grounded me anyway, although only for a week as opposed to a month, like she had promised. And explained to me that I mustn't use those words, and as they were bad words and could land me in trouble all the time. All this time, Gary stood there in the mirror next to her, smiling cheekily at her anger. "That was so funny," Gary said, when she finally left after confining me to my room for the rest of the day. "What are you talking about? I'm grounded for a week." "Yeah, but she got so angry. You her shoulder." He grinned. "Yeah, I guess so. It was kind of funny." I smiled slightly, remembering the look on her bright red face when she walked in. It was a pretty funny sight. "What's your name anyway?" I asked him. "I'm Gary," he introduced himself. "What's yours?" "I'm Alex." I then tried to pronounce his name, which I had difficulty doing, so I decided that I would call him Friend for now. And was easier for me to say. He looked slightly annoyed at this, but reluctantly agreed. "We should be friends," he said. "We have so much fun together." I agreed. We should be friends, and since nobody else could see him, he could stay at my house all the time. It would be brilliant, I thought. "Alex, it's going to be so much fun playing with you," he said, grinning widely, ear from ear. Since meeting him, we'd had a number of adventures, for lack of a better word, some slightly less pleasant than others. If you want me to post more about Gary, then let me know. Part 2. The Attic. This is the second part of a short series of personal stories about myself and my imaginary friend, Gary. As you may have come to notice, when I first met my friend Gary, I was able to see him when I looked in the mirror. This made talking to him somewhat difficult, considering we didn't have many mirrors in our house, the largest being a 2 or 3 foot mirror which hung above the fireplace in the living room. However, due to my size at the time, this was out of my reach, so was no use to me. The others were located in the bathroom above the sink, again out of my reach, unless I stood on something. The aforementioned dresser in my parents' room, which I was not allowed in, and finally the small mirror in my bedroom. The latter was the only one that I could really use to talk to Gary, so I tended to spend most of my time in my room talking to him. This made things especially difficult once I started going to school. As is with most children, when the first day of school starts, this was a strange and scary experience for me, since I wasn't used to being away from my parents or Gary for more than an hour or two at a time. I wished that Gary could have come with me, but outside of the toilets, I had no way of communicating with him. I was a fairly shy child, and I had a hard time talking with other boys in my class, so really Gary was the only one who I could really call a friend. So it was upsetting that I wasn't able to see him when I was out on the playground or in class. After a couple of months in school, I told Gary how I felt, and how I wished that he could come with me, and I could play with him all the time, not just in my bedroom. He simply smiled at me with his cheeky grin, and told me that there was a way to get him out of the mirror, so that we could just have fun whenever we wanted. Naturally, I was overjoyed to hear this and excitedly asked him how it would be possible. He told me that it was magic and that there was a few things that I would need to get in order for it to work. First off, I would need a large piece of card or paper, which I easily got my hands on. Secondly, I would need some candles. This was a slightly more difficult task, but eventually I found some stashed away in a drawer, as well as my dad's lighter, which he, as always, had left on his chair in the living room. Finally, I would need a glass. Again, this was easy to get. I just told my mom that I wanted a glass of squash, and she happily made me one. We had everything that we needed. Gary told me that the next thing that I needed to do was write a few things on the card. I wrote down each letter of the alphabet, as well as hello, yes, and no, all of which he helped me with, since I was still learning how to spell and write properly. I actually remembered asking him why we didn't need a goodbye, but he brushed it off, saying that we didn't need it for what we were doing. I'm sure you guessed what it was, and I now know that it was a Ouija board. But at the time, as far as I was concerned, it was just a bit of card and something writing on. Gary told me that in order for the magic to work, we needed to go up in the attic, where there would be no light other than the candles. I'd never been in the attic before, but I knew it was dark, and so I was hesitant about going up there on my own, and asked if my mom could help me, but he was quick to dismiss it, telling me that I couldn't tell anyone about this. Besides, he'd still be up there with me, and the light from the candles would stop it from being too dark. Eventually, I agreed and managed to get into the attic by using the pole hook that I had seen my parents use before. It was heavy and difficult to use, but eventually, with much deliberation, I managed to open it. Before I went up, Gary said that when I was up there, I wouldn't be able to see him or hear him. So he gave me some clear instructions about what I had to do. So I went up into the attic, closed the door behind me, and started following his instructions. First of all, I placed the candles on the floor, one in front of me, one to the left of me and one to the right, and one in the southeast and southwest, and lit each one, illuminated the room in the eerie glow. I was scared, but Gary told me to be brave and do what he had told me. So I sat in the middle of the candles with the Ouija board and placed the glass in the middle of it, with my hands firmly on it. "Hello?" I said out loud. Then, to my excitement and slight fear, the glass slowly moved to hello. "Is this scary?" I asked. And to my surprise, the glass slowly shifted to no. I asked who it was, and the glass spelled out a name, of which I couldn't spell out. I asked if I could speak to Gary, and again it shifted to no, before spelling out a long word, which I again didn't know. DANGER LEAVENOW. Slightly confused, I asked again if Gary was there. This time, after a slight pause, the glass again began to move, this time to hello. "Gary?" I asked. The glass slowly moved to yes. I was delighted. It was really him, my friend. Overcome with excitement, I asked him what we had to do now. Then I felt the glass move again, although with more force this time. It was trying to come away from my hand, so I held on to it as tightly as I could. Eventually, the glass slipped away from my fingers, shattering loudly against the wall. Terrified by both what had happened and what my parents would say if they had found out, I hurriedly blew out the candles and picked up all 5, as well as the card, and hightailed it out there into my bedroom. Sitting on the bed, grinning his usual cheeky grin, was Gary. I told you it would work, he said cheerfully. Now that I'm out of the mirror, I could be with you at all times. This is going to be great.